All right, welcome back, guys, to Foundations of Programming, day four. Man, day four already. Today we are going to go over lesson three, adding CSS. Right, yesterday we finished the HTML lesson. We got some nice practice working with the BBC website. And now we're gonna build off of it, right? So HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, they all make a huge part of the front end. CSS is just the next step, right? HTML was the skeleton of our program. The next part is actually making it look pretty, right? The styling. Today we will have a much lighter class. We have a couple of students who have either work or other requirements they have to meet for the day. So no biggie. We will continue making do without them. But let's get to CSS. What is CSS and where does it go? All right, so CSS is an acronym, right? Oh, actually, I didn't tell you guys the acronym for HTML. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, right? Uh, our much the much more the much a little the most latest version is HTML5. For CSS, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, right? And there's a reason why it's called the way that it is, right? CSS is how you style your web pages. This is the visual appearance of your page. You kind of saw that yesterday when working with your HTML document. When you try to replicate the BBC website, although you might have had all the parts that you could visually see on your screen, like all the divs, the buttons, the input boxes, whatever it may have been, the images even. Um, it didn't look too pretty, right? It was kind of stacked on top of each other because there was no actual styling. Right, CSS does all of that, from the color to the sizing of your elements, to even the orientation of where they are at on your page, right? So when you see stuff lined up horizontally in line or vertically, if you have like different parts of sections in a box and you see things everywhere, that's all done by CSS. You're gonna get another class of this in the immersive program, but here we are kind of getting your feet wet, exposing you to it so you can start working with it. So when you get to the immersive program, it's a little bit easier to pick up and you can focus on the other more important things, right? So how do we use CSS? Right. There are a couple ways. We talked a little bit about yesterday of one of the ways that you're going to see, and that's going to be the inline CSS, right? So that is going to be whenever you declare an element, you can give this element an attribute, and the attribute is called style, right? I showed you a small little demonstration of that with the Platoon logo when we changed the height and the width, right? That's the inline CSS. So CSS. The other way that you're going to see is in the HTML file itself, kind of like putting it in the body or in a separate file. The method we're going to work on is going to be adding CSS into a separate file, but connecting it to our HTML document, right? Kind of going back to the other concept that we talked about, the separation of concerns, right? When creating the file structure of our front end, or honestly anything really, you want to separate the roles and responsibilities of your program to their individual files or directories, um, to make sure that it's easier to maintenance, right? It's easier to continue developing and scale with time, right? When I say scale, I mean like for example, let's say you start off as a small business, your website can is only like a local website, local business. But what if you end up kind of popping off, right? And it gains traction and people start using your website or your software or anything like that. You want to be able to make sure that it's able to grow, right? And it's going to be very difficult for your website to add more functionality or grow if everything is just in one document. It would make it really, really difficult for other developers to have to update your website, right? It's not that it's impossible. It makes it very annoying having to do it all on one page. And there's a lot of times where you might end up messing something up, or messing the formatting up. So it's always better to separate the responsibilities of your program into different files. But here we have a quick little code snippet of how it's going to look like whenever use CSS in a different file and then link it to your HTML page, right? As you see here, we have the head tag. If you guys recall about the head tag, this is where we put all our metadata, pretty much it's the settings of our HTML document, right? And the syntax for linking a CSS document to your HTML is by using the link tag, right? It is a version of a self-closing tag, right? You do not need opening and closing tags. It's just a link tag itself. It's going to take two different attributes. The first one is going to be, if I remember correctly, the acronym is for relationship. Um, and the relationship is going to be the fact that it's a style sheet, right? So you're going to put the fact that this is going to be a style sheet for the REL. And then the other attribute is where the file is located at, right? The href. Typically, you want to make sure that they're around the same level in your directories as well. So it should look something like this. We have style.css. Once again, if it's somewhere else, you're going to have to specify the location of this file. You always want to, well, not always. We typically call them style. You only have one CSS document. Depending how big your website is, you may have additional CSS files. But typically the website is not that big where you end up just having to put it all in one. So it's fine. CSS syntax, right? It is different than HTML. It is not the same, right? Let's take a quick look at it. So in your CSS document, when you want to create some kind of styling declaration, it's kind of what we call it. You're going to specify what element you want to style, right? This is what we call the selector, right? There's different ways to grab different elements. The more basic and beginner way of doing this is to call the specific element itself, right? So here, you can kind of already, I guess that the selector that they're grabbing is the P selector, right? Which is for paragraph. So in this CSS document, what they are doing is they are styling every single P tag. So when you do this, it'll quite literally grab all the P tags of your document and update them, right? And then we're going to talk about later how we specifically only update certain tags, even if there's multiple P tags, but we'll get that to in a little bit. But you're going to declare the selector that you want to style, and then immediately following that, you're going to open up curly braces, right? And it should look like this, open and closing curly braces. Within these curly braces is where you actually add the styling that's going to belong to this element, right? There's going to be multiple things that you are able to style, and there's going to be different like types of inputs that you can give it. We're not going to go through every single one because there's quite literally like over 100 or hundreds of them of different input and attributes combined. But the type of style that you want to create is going to be your property, right? So here they're changing the color of the P element. And then after the property, it's going to be the property value, right? So think of like a dictionary when you think about key value pairs. That's kind of how it's broken down here, right? They use curly braces and then they give it a key value pair. It's very similar to that, right? So the color is a property, and the actual color itself of what it should be is the property value. This will be called the declaration statement. Any questions so far? Right on. So how do we read CSS files? CSS files, like most files that we use, are going to be read from top to bottom, right? What comes further down in your page will overwrite what comes before it, right? This is where the name CSS stands for, Cascading Style Sheets, right? So look at this example here. What color is this P tag going to end up being?
Blue.
Absolutely, it's going to be blue, right? This might be the top of our document. They initially styled the paragraph with the color red, and they also styled the font weight and set it to bold. But then the next declaration we see here is, once again, they're calling the P tag, but this time they're leaving it to blue. So uh, this will end up making the P tag blue. But what about the font weight? What happens with this? Is the
Stays.
font weight absolutely, it's going to stay, right? Keegan beat me to it. So because we didn't override the font weight on here, just because we declared another style for p tag does not mean that we overrode the font weight. The only thing that we changed was the color blue. So as your file goes down, if you change anything that we had set previously, it will override it. But if you had changed the font weight before for a similar tag, and if you don't override it later down in your CSS file, it'll still apply. So you don't have to worry about that. But it's going to be red from top to bottom. What this says is, all right, I'm gonna change the color of my paragraph to red. Then I'm gonna change it the font weight to bold. I changed my mind. I'm gonna change the color to blue. But we never said anything else again about font weight. So font weight stays the same. Nothing else has touched it, right? And that's how your CSS file is going to interact. Before we continue, let me go ahead and open up the repo real quick. It should be lesson 3. I think I have a README for CSS I created. Yeah, I did. Awesome. Not every class. I think I only created repo or README for the first 2 lessons. All right. But yeah, so we talked about that. Let's look at some additional syntax. We talked about the example, right? I showed you the color. In this example as well, they're also changing the margins, right? We also talked about how we're going to use CSS, the different ways of using it. Inline CSS, this is another recap from yesterday, an example of inline CSS. Here we have the p tag, right? This is a snippet of an HTML p tag, right? This is like as if you're getting this from the HTML document. And the element itself, they call the style attribute, and they start styling inside of here. Um, it's fairly similar to what the CSS looks like if you notice, right? It's still using the key value pair type of thing where you have a property and a property value, and then it separates the next one with a semicolon, just like uh here, right? The only difference is that you don't have to open up curly braces and you don't have to specify the tag because you're already in that tag, right? And this would style the paragraph to red with a font size of 20. Uh, I
And that's the way
mentioned
not recommended, correct?
is not. I'm a
Makes it harder to change later, right?
correct, right?
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, I don't want to say not recommended because not that it's not recommended, but there's a reason why we don't use it on every single element or why this isn't our first choice. And we will talk about it in a little bit. But yes, you are correct, Nick. The next one's going to be the internal CSS. And you also don't want to do this because this is like saying that you're going to put all the CSS inside of like your HTML document, right? Which you don't necessarily want to do. You want to have your style sheet in a different file. But this essentially creates a style tag that sets the styling of your stuff in your HTML document. You don't want that. What you want to use is external CSS, where you create a separate file and you link it there. Now, can you do this? Absolutely. If it's a very small website or something very small that you just want to kind of create, you can do this. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're planning for your website to scale, right? If you're doing this for a business that you're gonna have to update later or expand, then ideally you want to plan ahead. You don't want to put the styling within the HTML document because it's just gonna make it more confusing later. Just put it in a separate file to make it easier for you. It's just one extra file, no biggie. We saw a small example. Here's another one. Here they are specifically changing the body, right? And in the body, they changed the font family. The font family is essentially it's discussing like the actual font itself, what type of font you're using, right? They changed it to Arial, but also notice there's sans serif right afterwards. This here, we'll talk more about the font. The reason why there's 2 different fonts here is in the event the person who is opening up your web page, let's say their browser doesn't support a specific font you're using, you give it alternates for your website to default to. right? In the event that whether, their browser doesn't support it or that's not something that's used anymore, right? You give it options for it to default to something else. Some common uses for CSS properties. These are the ones that you're probably going to be using the most when styling, which is going to be color, right? Color is going to change your actual element itself. If it's the H1 element and you change the color to navy, it's going to change the color of your text, right? If you want to change the background of your H1 element, there's a specific tag for that, or a specific property, as I should say, which is background color, right? Very specific background color. Then you give it light yellow, and you'll see how these work. They'll give you options of different uh, colors you'll give it, and we'll talk about how we can define colors in a little bit. Another common one that you might see is going to be text and font, right? So font size is going to change as you see the size of your text. If you want to make it bigger, uh, if you want to change the font type, you use font family. And then aligning your text within your elements, you would use text align, right? This will align your text. So, for example, you have a paragraph tag inside of an H element. You can, use that to kind of align it, put it on the left side, and the right side, shift it up, shift it down, stuff like that, right? We're going to talk a little bit more about the different values and what type of values they use in a little bit. You can kind of already see here font size. I notice it takes 16px for pixels. We'll talk about these in a little bit. Text align, center. These are very specific, right? Very unique to very specific properties, right? You obviously wouldn't give this type of value to font family, right? There's no font family called center. You don't have to memorize these, right? There's so many of them. As you work with CSS, you'll get better at some of these and you'll remember some of the most common ones. But typically, when for at least you guys, as you go to the immersive program, since CSS isn't like your biggest focus, uh, you won't become a CSS expert. You'll know enough to get by to make things look pretty. But CSS itself is a skill on its own, right? People specialize on front end or design, right? Web design, and user experience and user interfaces and stuff like that. So this is a very specific specialization. People make a whole career out of just this. So uh, don't feel like you have to memorize everything right now. You don't have to. The thing about full stack software engineering is that you're a jack of all trades, right? So you're not going to be a subject matter expert of everything, but you'll know a little bit of everything, right? Kind of like my friend here, Nick, us combat engineers, right? We're like jack of all trades, really. Uh, Spacing, right? You can space your elements. So the div here, we see the example. They're able to change the margin and padding. People tend to kind of get these confused. So here's a quick little explanation. Margin is going to be the space outside your element. Padding is the space inside the element. I can kind of show you that in real time. Let's go to the weather app. The inspect tool kind of does something for you that it can show you what you're looking at. If you're at some kind of websites like the weather app, when you go to the inspect tool, you're gonna see a little image. Let's see if we can find it. Where's that? Let me highlight something. I highlighted this box right here. I should be able to come in here. This is the styles page on the bottom section. Your inspect tool. You can see styles. Typically here, I think if you scroll far enough, there it is. You can see different parts of the element you're hovering over. There it is. Uh, Notice that it kind of shows you already. This part right here, the center, is the actual element itself. So that's going to be your text or your image itself, right? That is the element. The space right outside of it will be the padding, right? And then after the padding is typically a border. As you see, when I hover over the border, there's nothing that gets highlighted, so they don't have a border, so you can't visually see it. Uh, and then the margin is there's no margin either. It looks like it. Let me see. Yeah, look, honestly, I should have been able to tell from hovering over the padding. You see everything highlighted green? That is all padding. So I can tell from this image that they probably have no border and no margin. So margin is set to 0, but they have the padding taking up all that space. So you can use this tool to kind of see a little bit of that. Let's check something else maybe that can give me a better look of it. Mm, Here we go. This section right here, this is all margin. They don't have any border and they have no padding on the element. But when I hover over the margin, you can see there's some margin exposed there. Let's check this element right here. This long div, because this is a div. This is the element, right? Notice that the element naturally took up most of the space. Here's the padding. They have no border and no margin. But even though the element isn't technically extending all the way to the right side, this is everything all the way to the right is elements. That's the element itself. Although the text doesn't go all the way to the right, that's still counting it as the element. Here is the pattern itself. So just be aware of how the element actually interacts when you size stuff up. Right? If you have and this whole thing was covered with one big div, but your element was on top left, all this empty space might still be covered as the element. Right? Just be aware of that. Let's see if I can hover over something like that real quick. Element, no padding, no border, no margin, no nothing like that. The whole thing is the element. It'll make a little bit more sense as you start messing with it. All right. Yeah, so margin is a space right outside the element, and the space is inside by the element. I should have worded that better. I should have said like outside the border. Padding is inside of the border. It's between the border and the element, where margin is between the outside and the border, if that makes sense. I apologize. I should have worded this a lot better. So we saw margin, we saw padding. Here's how you create a border, or you will use the border element. The border element typically takes three inputs: the thickness, the type of border, and the color of the border. So you can ideally also make this like dashed, right? Like a dash border. There's other borders you can use as well, right? So they put a border around this image, right? So here they're formatting the image and they set a border around it. So you can do stuff like that. All right. All these are elements you're going to use pretty often. Font size, text line, right? Any form of spacing is going to be very big. Borders and width, stuff like that, right? Let me just make sure I'm on the right track. Yeah, okay, cool. That's why I did this because I know now the slides don't cover everything. CSS units, right? Here is a unit of how you're going to essentially format things, right? We have absolute units. These are your pixels, right? Um, Everything on your screen is essentially a pixel. So we're able to measure stuff by pixels. So the absolute units will be your pixels. These are fixed sizes. You can use px. You can even use cm. I think there's another one you can use. I don't remember the top of my head. But 10 pixels is a quick example. You also have relative units. So these are based on the parent element or viewport. And we'll talk about these in a little bit. But EM, you might see this often, twice the size of the current element. So what if I want it to be the size of the element, it would be 1 EM. So if I want to use the EM as a measurement, by specifying 2 EM, I'm referring to twice the size of the element. 3 EM will be 3 times the size of the element. So what does that mean? Let's say I get an image, right? And the image is naturally 500 pixels by 500 pixels, right? But then I give it a styling of 2 EM. What's going to be the size of my image afterwards? Not a true question.
Double that.
Yeah, 1,000 pixels by 1,000 pixels, absolutely, right? So if the whatever element you're using already has a size, a default size, by giving an EM measurement, is going to use the already size of the element and just change the value based off its original size, right? Another one that you're gonna see, probably my favorite one, the one that I use the most, or you might end up using the most, is view height and view width, right? So the view height and view width is referring to whatever device you are using. So if if I tell a picture that I want it to be 50 view height, is going to take up 50% of the height of my screen, right? And same thing with the view width. If I tell it, give me 10 view width, it's going to take 10% of the width of my screen. So these are commonly used for responsiveness. Percentage, it's fairly similar to that as well. But this one's a little bit more specific. This one can be a little tricky, and I'll show you guys that in real time. All right, let's continue with the slides. Colors, how to use colors, changing color, right? So here is a quick example of the ways that you would define color or give color values. Uh, which one you use is honestly going to be up to you, right? We have four different tags here. The tags aren't really what matters here. Is really how they're assigning a value to the color, right? So all four of these are changing the color of their respective elements. The first one is by utilizing a word. So if you know the name of a specific color, red, orange, blue, as you saw, like light yellow, there's already some pre-built ones that come with CSS. You are able to type it out, right? If you want something a little bit more specific, a color that doesn't necessarily have a name, like a different variation of like what's the word I'm looking for? Saturation and stuff like that. Or I don't think saturation is a word. I'm not a color expert, so I do apologize. But there's some kind of range of color of shade that is not exactly red, but it's a darker shade or a lighter shade. You could specify that, right? We're using these matters here. First one is the hex. Uh, I'm not even going to start telling you how these work because I never use hex and I never use HSLA. So I'm going to leave this to you if you want to look more into the specific unit of color measurements. I encourage you. Um, I don't like this one. I like RGBA. But yeah, there is the hex version. Um, it takes a letter combo and a number combo to specify a specific color. I'm not good with it. The HSLA is another one. The HSLA stands for something.
It's like
Color.
hue, saturation,
Yeah.
something, something.
Yeah, hue, saturation, lightness, and alpha. Nick was on it. He's a color expert over here. But yeah, so you're able to do this stuff like that. Notice how they have it set, right? Zero, like by percentages, so you can change the uh, levels of it. I don't like it. I like RGBA. Red, green, blue, and A stands for a alpha, I think is what it stands for. It's either how transparent something is, RGBA meaning. I think it's how transparent something is. Alpha, yeah, it is alpha. See, I ain't wrong. Uh, it's opacity, which I think is transparency, isn't it? Yeah, yeah, fully transparent. There we go. Yeah, I ain't wrong. 0.0 to 1.0. So the range of the opacity that you set it's limited to one, right? One being fully opaque, zero being fully transparent. I think by default, if you don't add the any opacity, it's a middle range. So it's not transparent or opaque necessarily. It's just visible, I guess. Well, I guess that would be like one, right? Uh, but you don't have to include the one. I think it'll still work if you just give these three, if I'm correct. And then you give it combinations of RGB. Now you don't have to remember these, right? You're like, dang, Roger, now I have to start learning color combinations. That sucks. What you can do is you can go to extensions, You can look for extensions. I think you can do RGBA or color picker. Is this a marketplace? No, Chrome Web Store. You can do color picker. There's a bunch of good ones out there. People who do this often, that work with CSS often, have like extensions like this, where you'll click the extension, and it'll open up like a color wheel, and then you look for a color you want, and it'll give you uh the combo for it in different versions. I had a good one on my last computer. Uh, I don't have one here to show you, but if you work with like colors and design very often, I would check one of these out. It might come in handy when you're developing your websites. Uh, Ultimate Color Picker, quickly pick from page. Yeah, so you can look more to these if you're interested, but you don't have to memorize these codes, right? You don't have to have codes in the back of your pocket for every specific color. Not needed at all. Just know that there are four different ways of how you can select color. Choose the one that you like. Obviously, if you're always using Word, this will be very limited, all right, to what you use. So if you want to expand on very specific colors, then you will use one of these three. Uh, RGBA or hex will probably be your best bets. Uh, but yeah, font. Imported font from Google. So you are able to change your font. You can use Google fonts. So CSS will naturally already come with some pre-built fonts, or HTML will come with some built-in fonts. No, yeah, CSS. But you can also look up your own fonts if you like, right? So if you type in fonts, you'll see Google fonts. You also have other places you can get more fonts from. But the way that it'll work is that you're going to come here, and you can, if you already know a font you're looking for, you can search for it, or you can kind of go through here and look for it. Uh, let's see, feeling, appearance, calligraphy. They got already some pre-built ones that you can set for filters, or you can kind of start navigating through here. Font itself is a skill of its own as well. If you're taking a font on web design, certain fonts say different things whenever you look at them, or make you feel certain ways. All right, some are more business oriented. Some should call for attention. Some should be a little bit quieter. Like once again, another skill itself, right? Web design is a skill in itself. So don't feel bad if your fonts look horrible. But you can come down here and find one that looks visually appealing for your website, that fits, how you might feel, or how you think your consumer should feel when they look at your web page. Should it be professional, right? Um, but you just go ahead and pick one, right? Let's go ahead and pick a unique one. Let's try this one right here. Um, and what we are going to do is I'm going to try it out actually with my HTML document that we have created. All right, we do have an HTML document that we can use to kind of talk through these. I don't know why I wasn't doing that. In lesson 3, you can create a new document, or you can just use the HTML index.html file you created in lesson 2. I don't care how you do it, but just have something that you can work with. I'm going to go ahead and open this with Live Server. Open in browser. And then I'm going to set this here. And then grab this one. Lesson 2. HTML demo. Here we go. All right. So hello, this is my font demo. All right. So what you're going to do is you're going to pick a font. I decided to go with this one. Let me minimize this a little bit so I can get some more working area. This should be fine. When you get to the font page, there's going to be different styles of fonts, right? And some fonts are going to have more styles than others. As you can see here, I chose whatever this font is called. And if you scroll down, you'll see there's like regular 400, medium 400, semi-bold, bold. You would choose the ones that you want, and then it'll even show you examples how it would look like in a paragraph. Obviously, this isn't the most prettiest font. It looks, I guess, cute if it was like a diary, but not for a professional website. But you choose what you want. I'm gonna go ahead and choose. Let's see, selected preview. Where is my selection? I think I have to go to get fonts. Yeah, here we go. Uh, so you can get embedded code. So you guys can see, after I got to the font that I wanted to get, I essentially came up to the top and I put get embedded code. So it already kind of pre-formatted for you. That's why Google Fonts is pretty cool. And then it'll show you how do you want to use it. You want to use it on the web. On an Android, it's going to be iOS. We are using a web. And what we're going to use is a link option, right? And it already creates it for you. Embedded code in the head of your HTML, right? So it's pretty cool. Let me go ahead and I'm going to press copy code. And it's literally a link tag, right? It's a link tag very similar to how I showed you guys earlier of the snippet. It already comes pre-formatted. The hyper link reference or the hyper reference is referred to the Google API, right? So that's where it's referencing whenever it does load up our website. Some of these can be a little bit more complex. Some require some additional installations depending on what type of font you use. Um, you might find some that require you to jump through hoops to get it working. So I will be honest with you on that part. So be careful which one you use. But there it goes. I copied it directly into my head. Let me just fix the nesting here. And I'm going to save it. And it is not working. Let's look at it. They want me to do this one too. Okay. Uh, bu- 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 I believe they want me to copy this into the CSS file too. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and see if that's what they require from me. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to link a style sheet. I don't have a style sheet right now, so I'm going to have to create one. I'm going to say link. And it's going to be a reference or a relationship, I guess. It's equal to style sheet. And then the href is going to be style.css. And let's go ahead and create it because it does not exist in here. Style.css. Fancy script unifier. I don't know if it's the correct one. This can be a little tricky to work with. Hmm. Let's see. Bear with me. No, why aren't you working? It should just work. Okay, give me a second, because not all these work well. I've had it before where I'll use one. We go through the same process and it doesn't work, and I choose a much easier one, and then it works. Uh, so let's see if we can get this working. Let's try maybe try an easier one. Maybe that won't work. Roboto, get fonts, get font, get embedded code. Yeah, I think this is for something else. Let's ignore that. Notice that on the Roboto one, it put two of this here. So it's giving me the code for all of them. I don't want all of them. I only want the Roboto one. Let's go back to my HTML document. Let me clear my CSS and my index HTML. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. And I think I had it. I think it worked. Gosh darn it. Give me a second. Let me do it again. I'm pretty sure it worked. So some, as I mentioned earlier, some are not that helpful. They might give you some issues and they won't work the same. Some might require you to install other stuff to get it working. So you kind of have to experiment with some of these. They're not all the most friendliest of all. Let me go ahead and disable this to see if it actually made an impact. And yeah, it's not making an impact. Okay. I'm gonna see if I can find one that works. But typically you just copy them from here and it should work just as well. Uh, what if I try the other one? Will this one do something better? I owe you guys a much better version of this explanation because it's not working as I intended it to. Yeah. All right, we'll put a pause on this and we'll come back to this one and I'll find one that works. They're not all very helpful. So as you just saw, unfortunately. But there are some that are good. If not, VS Code or CSS come with some helpful ones anyway, so you could just use those instead. It is what it is. Uh, Let me get rid of these. I owe you guys one for this one. All right, let's continue. After the break, I'll get it working and we can talk to that one. But we just said we can do the fonts. Uh, you should be able to link it just as this. Literally just copy paste and it should work. And then you can use them. This one imported a style and it allows you to use a style as well. You're also able to use. Who has heard of Bootstrap? You heard of Bootstrap? So there's websites out there that'll provide for you pre-formatted uh, CSS, Bootstrap. You'll get a quick explanation of this, like a quick little 1 hour lecture to show you how you can use this. Um, you actually have to read the documents to see how it works. I don't like Bootstrap because I don't like using other people's work. Uh, but the way that it works is essentially people create very nice, visually appealing work, and they provide them for you, right? You can go to themes. Was it themes? Explore the dashboard documents. No, that's not what I'm looking for. Examples. Uh, V2. I'll see if I do plugin. Here we go. All right, so there's different components that you can use. Here's a very quick one. Like for the button, uh, notice that these buttons have like a specific style. Uh, they essentially show you how they look like, right? And then you can go through installing them, installing Bootstrap onto your project, and then you're able to use it as a class, right? It's a quick installation. I just don't know. I don't want to go through the documents to do it, but you do have websites like this where you can install something for your project, and it allows you to leverage pre-built, uh, you know, buttons or styling of different types. There's some really good ones and there's some really bad ones out there. So use them as you want to. Um, Let's see if we can do card. Right? You can kind of see some very simple stuff, nothing too crazy. But like if you don't want to have to make things like this, you could come and use some of these carousels. A good one, I think. It provides you the ability to do something like this on your web page. So you're able to install Bootstrap and use the carousel. So someone who's significantly better at CSS than I am, spent time creating the CSS and they pretty much put it out there for everybody else to use. So if you don't know how to style something like this on your web page, then you don't need to because you can use Bootstrap or you can kind of just reverse engineer whatever they did and learn how to do it. Up to you. But you are able to import this styling, and they kind of show you how the styling is working to mimic this, right? Uh, the different buttons and stuff like that, the carousel items, whatever. How to have it with captions. So I just want to make sure that you know this is available for you. So when you guys get to personal projects and you need like resources, you can think of Bootstrap. They'll talk to you about it in the immersive program. You can either use this or try to be creative and create your own styling. Up to you. All right, colors.html. This is gonna be our first example. Oh, it was supposed to be y'all's example actually. So let me actually show you how we can do this. We are going to do not index HTML, but I'm gonna go ahead and move the style.css into the. I'm gonna copy. Never mind. I'll copy this over into my HTML demo. So I have the states.html in here. Let me stop server and run it again. We'll go lesson 2, HTML demo. Why is it doing that? States.html. Maybe because there's 2 of them in here. We'll just copy this and move it in here. Then we can delete this one. Then I can open with my server. Cool. So here we have the states assignment that we did recently. To install the CSS document, once again, you're going to come to your metadata. We're going to do a link. You're going to give it a relationship, which is going to be a style sheet. And then you're going to give it a href, which will be the location of the file. They're in the same spot. So I'm just going to go ahead and give it the CSS name. Now, we can add some styling. So in the styling, I'm going to style the H1 element, right? I'm going to give it a color of red. And there you go. We're changing the color. Let's go ahead and give it a background color. And this is going to be blue. And notice that the moment I gave it that background color, you might have thought that the states, it stopped at the end of the word, but no, right? The H1 element is actually taking up the entirety of my browser. Right? It's a little misleading when you create these. That's why whenever you guys did your BBC website, your elements are kind of stacking up on top of each other because they naturally just want to take as much space as they can from left and right. Right? They'll naturally take from left to right. The top to bottom is a little bit different. Then when we start adding things in there, they start actually kind of collapsing onto each other. But even though there's no other text here, technically this H1 element is as big as my browser. So let's fix that, right? Let's fix that. How can we do that? Well, there's a couple ways. What's going on? We have width, right? We talked about width. So I'm gonna change the width of my H1. And I can do it, let's say we can use absolute units, so we can say something like 200 pixels. And notice that it now changes the width. It doesn't change specifically my font, but the element itself, it will collapse it. Well, what if I do 50 pixels? Right? Uh, it's going to collapse it, but it's still trying to display my the text in there, and that's going to be an issue, right? Let's say font size, we can say 100%. Let's see how this works. And now, what happened when I gave it font size 100%? What did it do? What do you think it did, guys? Any guesses? Before I added font size, it states kept its normal size. I have the width to H1 set to 50 pixels, but states was overlapping it, right? It was going past its border because it's naturally going to try to display to you uh the text, right? H1 by default, it comes with a certain text size, right? So it's going to be to that default size of what the H1 element is. So what I do when you give it font size, it's going to take 100% of the space that it should be taking, right? The font is going to take 100% the size set to the element itself, and the element size is with 50%, 50 pixels. Let's go ahead. We'll do font size. It's going to be 100% again, but this time I'm going to change the width. This time I say 50 view width instead. And the states stay the same. Why did it stay the same? I'm curious why it stayed the same. But notice that the width took half of my browser, right? Took half of the application. Now let's look at what happens when I open up my browser. And you can see it is expanding with my browser. And that's why view width, view height are very helpful because they're a little bit more responsive. Whereas before I use pixels, no matter how small or how big, it stayed at 50 pixels. So it's not very responsive, right? Let's say it was 500 pixels. Oh, that's way too big. Disregard. 250. Dang, dude. 100? There's no way. Oh, I'm putting X. My apologies. There we go. There's no way. I'm done. Well, there you go. There you have the states. 50 pixels is an absolute unit. No matter what size your browser is, it will always take to 500 pixels. And it can look not so good once it gets smaller, right? Um, if you have other text that might be here, it might not be the same. Let's try font size. Let's say 25. No, let's say 10. 10 view width. There we go. When I give the sizing to the fonts as view width, it's going to expand with my screen. But what if I have a screen that can't support 500 pixels, but I set my width to 500 pixels? It's going to look wonky. Let me go ahead and open the inspect tool. Let's see how this is going to look like on other devices. The SE, Pixel 7, iPad Air, right? If I want to create something that goes from left to right of my screen, I probably wouldn't want to use an absolute unit like pixels because it won't be responsive, right? Once I get to the wide screen, because people have like those extra wide screens, right? You start getting to areas where it's not going to look well for everybody. So you want to make sure that your page is able to compensate for that. Right, iPad Pro. So somebody on the iPad Pro wouldn't be able to see that nav bar if it was all the way from left to right. So the units that you use to set your styling is gonna matter a lot. Right. So be careful which one to use. What does auto do for sizing? Let's see. Auto. Wow. I've never used auto. I wonder how this can go wrong. Why would we have view width if we have auto? Widely available across major browsers, baselines, auto, syntax auto, link percentage, min, max, max, fit content. Let me go to the definition real quick. Oh, it doesn't have a definition. Okay, I am interested. I've never seen auto, Andy. Thank you for showing me this one. I usually use view width and view height, HTML or CSS, auto, Stack Overflow. This is where all the old wizards go. Yeah, it might bite us in the butt depending on what property we use. We'll experiment with auto, Andy, as we progress through our CSS lecture, so we can see how it's gonna work. And I wonder if it will be bad on anything. Because for example, we probably won't. Let's say I can already tell where it's probably gonna be bad. Let's look back at our document. Let's say the width is supposed to be 100% of our view width, right? That's good. But what if I set it auto to the font size? Font size, it did not impact it at all. I can only make a browser so small. Yeah, auto didn't give me what I was looking for on the the text, right? So I guess it's gonna be dependent on which or what property you're using because auto didn't give me what I was looking for here for text. Maybe for text, I would want to say, always keep it 20% of the view width. Now that's actually way too much. Let's go 5 view width. All right, that way it's actually a little bit more responsive. So it's going to depend from what it looks like, Andy, on what element you're actually using it on, because not all of them is going to respond how you expect it to respond. All right, there we go. Now it's a little bit more responsive. So for text, I wouldn't want to use auto from what it looks like. Uh, you definitely want to make sure that text is responsive by the view width and view height. But see, you wouldn't know this unless you experiment with it, right? So these are things that you're gonna learn as you mess around with it. But there's a lot of things to your disposal. So we saw the view width, we saw height. I'll show you. I'm sorry, we saw width, but we didn't see a height. So I'll show you height for the sake of it. View height. Right. So you can set the height and let's manipulate this one. All right. So view height works the same. What if I accidentally put view width on height? What would that do? Right. Notice that the view width doesn't change when I change the height. But if I change the width of my screen, the height changes with it. So pretty cool trick, right? So it might be a good idea to use view height even for, I'm sorry, view width even for the height. If you know that you might expand both ways depending on the device you're using. So pretty nice. Uh, this itself, once again, is another skill. So you have to experiment with this. When you are developing your website, it's probably going to be a good idea that you have your inspect tool open, right? You're going to want to maybe click the smallest screen. I don't know which is the smallest one out of these. I'm going to be honest with you. Let me see. What's the latest iPhone right now? They only have iPhone 14 actually. I don't know what the smallest screen is. Pixel 3 might sound like small because it says Pixel. Um, let's try what it looks like for the Pixel 3. Okay, that's misleading. Whatever. But yeah, pretty cool. No throttling, mid-tier mobile. You can see it when it's rotated. Yeah, not very good. Not good for sideways. Even here it's a little wonky, right? So you're gonna want to have stuff like this opened up when you're messing around with your web page, especially if you're actually trying to use your web page for something serious when you guys are creating this. And that's another thing that I recommend to you guys. As you guys progress your course, you're going to build upon things, right? Your like your homework or your assignments are going to start off small, right? And the next day you're essentially building off on the assignment you worked on the previous day, and then so on and so forth. So whenever you get to React, and you start learning the fundamentals of React, what that first day that you work on React and you get an assignment, I'm pretty sure, I'm like 199% sure that these assignments are going to build off of each other. So what I wouldn't do is just forget about the assignment and just leave them to collect dust. Uh, because realistically, although you are doing it to learn React or Django, you're technically already building a part of a website. So why not just expand upon it as you progress through the course, right? So you're gonna be building a bunch of like APIs. You're gonna be building parts of the website. When you guys work on React, you're gonna be building pretty much your front end. When you guys work on Django, you're gonna be building a whole back end. So expand on it, right? Maybe use that project to complete a whole website. So you have something already done before you even hit personal projects. So you guys can absolutely do that. Also, what you can do if you have time, because understand not everybody does. We have kids. Some of you guys might be doing stuff after class, or you might need the extra time to ensure you just go over it. Uh, as you are learning different tasks or skills in the program, you can use that time. Like once you complete your assignments, all right, let me use what I just learned today to kind of start up my own websites, right? Maybe like my resume website. Like you might create a portfolio website that talks about you specifically, your background, right? Your experience, to display your other pieces of work. We had a student when I was coming through the program. His name was Jesse. I was trying to remember his name. His name was Jesse, and he was building his resume as we were going to the program on his website. So by the time we got to personal projects, he had all the tools he needed really to deploy his website and then go straight into his own personal project. And on his website, he had like embedded videos that he of his work, right? Him showing his work, his portfolio. He dabbled in other stuff beside full stack. He was using his coding skills to uh, code with a Raspberry Pi. He made like some. He coded this device for Halloween around that because it was Halloween around that time. He built like this box that had like this, I guess like a scarecrow or something inside this box. So when people got like approached it and touched it, it opened up and scared them, right? So he used code to program that. So you just showed them like, hey, I'm not just a developer. Like I leverage my tools in my day-to-day life. Like, you know what? I know how to do this. I can build this. And you know, I worked on Raspberry Pis or I might do some game dev on the side. So even when I'm not working, I am finding ways to better myself and then display that on your website. So he was building the site as we were progressing through the curriculum. So that's definitely something that you guys can do. That not everyone's gonna be able to do that, I understand, but a recommendation if you have the time and ability to do so. So yeah, same thing with the CSS. And once you guys start going to React, CSS, HTML, use that time for on the side to build your own website, and you're getting more practice. So why not, right? All right, let's go ahead and continue. So we use font size. What's another cool one that you might need to know? Background color with high font size. Let's talk about margin and padding. Margin and padding. All right. I'm going to go ahead and reduce this to 50 view width. All right. First and foremost, before I start doing padding, I'm going to do border so we can visually see the exterior. We talked about border. You can set up a border. The first thing you're set up, I want to show you already. Okay, notice how CSS is going to help you a lot. If you want something like you don't remember the exact property that you're trying to do, but you know it involves fonts, you type in font and you automatically already get suggestions. Font family, font size, font weight, style, display, variant. So although you might be a little rusty on CSS, you've been out of the game for a hot minute, you don't remember all these properties, to save your life. If you start typing sometimes, like if you know I want to upgrade my background, you can start typing background and you're like, oh, here it is. I knew there were some properties about it. Well, what am I looking for? I want to specifically do something with it, move the position or whatever, or change the image in it. You definitely uh get hits, right? But let's go ahead and do border. Border offers us other stuff as well. The radius, we'll talk about this one a little bit. Border color, border left, so on and so forth. But let's just do border for now. We're gonna do border. I'm gonna set it to something very simple. We'll do 2 pixels, and then I'm gonna set it to solid and black and save. I don't know if you guys can see it. Let's increase it a little bit to 5, just so you can for you guys. 'Cause I know maybe it might be hard to see my browser, but there you go. Here's my border solid. As I hover over, you can see the other dimensions. There's a bunch of other units of measurement that you can use. Oh, good thing I didn't even try to explain all these. There's more than I could have ever thought. Uh, you probably won't ever really use half of these anyways. But here is a bunch of dimensions. Let's go to the type of border. I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna remove solid and black. Let's see what it gives me. We have solid. It doesn't give me other options, but I know there is dashed. I'm gonna show you the dash version too. All right, so you can do dashed. If you want more about border, you definitely can look at it. Let's go ahead and just go back to solid. But here's my border. We're now seeing the exterior. Let's add some padding. I'm gonna say padding. For padding, I'm gonna give it 10 pixels. And then yeah, padding doesn't they really didn't show me too much. Let's do 50 pixels so you can see it. There you go. You can kind of see already. Let me hover over with the inspect tool. Let's get rid of this because we don't need it. There we go. Uh, padding. Here's the padding. So by adding the padding, I was able to separate the element away from the edge, right? I can see the edge there thanks to the border as well. And here's the element. This is everything in dark blue is my element. But my word in my the word states of my element is the top left. Doesn't mean that the rest isn't still element. All this is padding, right? There's a border margin. You can kind of already see there's margin at the top and there's margin at the bottom. Let's see how this works. I'm gonna say margin and I'm gonna say 50 pixels as well. And I'm gonna save it. And look at it, it pushed off the edges. Let's hover over it. Here is my margin. right? The margin, it pushed off the edge. So the margin is from the edge of everything to the border itself. So there is spacing between element and border, from border to the edge of the tag in essence, right? Uh, I guess a better way of explaining element is really, it's not really element, it's more like the value of your elements, right? This is the value, the content. So the content of my header is here, but the header itself is everything from the margin inside, right? So I guess maybe using different wording for that, because this is really just the value. The value of my H1 is everything within this box. Here's padding, here's border, and here's margin. We're also able to specify something ourselves. We can say margin left, and I'm gonna say 0 pixels. And notice how I reduce the margin. There's no more left margin, but it still keeps the margin to the top, the right, and the bottom. Why is that? Why do I still have margin everywhere except the left?
Cascading.
Cascading. Thank you. Absolutely. Right. The line right above it set padding everywhere, but the line below it set the left side specifically to 0. So that line 10 here overrode the left part margin, but because of the cascading effect, right? Margin still exists. All right, thank you for that, Nick. But yeah, there we go. That's pretty cool. So you can manipulate that. Let's fix this text. I don't like that states is in the top left corner. And what's something that we saw earlier that can probably allow me to manipulate this text? I covered it briefly through the repo. There is a property that we can do. Correct. It is text align. Right, text align. I kind of typed it out there, and it's already giving me input that I can use. I can do and I can do justify, and we'll talk about justify later. I can do left, right, start. Uh, and will probably put me at the bottom right corner if I'm correct. Start, I believe it's already at the start. I'm gonna do center, and I'm gonna save this. And it centered it, but centered it where? Right, centered it from left to right. Right, text line align me from left to right. Right. Let's see if I do start. What does that look like? Yeah, by default, it looks like L's are ready to start. And N should put me on the far right then. Absolutely. There we go. So you would think text line by doing center, I thought it would put me in the center, right? Well, there's going to be another one, which is, I believe, align content. I'll set this to center. Oh, let me put the other one back to center too. My bad. There you go. And now it's centered. So text align is going to align from left to right, where align content was aligning from top to bottom. So you're gonna have to use multiple different properties and set them to kind of get it exactly where you want. If I wanted to get to the bottom right, I would say end, and then give the align content end as well. And there it is. It's in the bottom right of my value, right? So you can manipulate this absolutely. But you need some. It's gonna need a little bit of work. You know what I'm saying? Um, do I have any questions so far? All right, good, because we're gonna go on a quick break because I went a little bit over time. Time is 6:45. Let's go ahead and come back at 6:55. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Before we cut, we were kind of going over some of the most common ones, common property and property values that you would see. Um, and before I put you guys onto the student one, let's go ahead and just cover. We went over border width, units, we did background color, font size, text align. We'll do font family here from CSS real quick. And I think that should be the last one before we can break off into our assignment. But let's look at font family, font family. And right off the bat, it's giving me a bunch of them. I don't know what this default is. I'm just gonna go ahead. I'm assuming it's like Times New Roman or something like that. Let's do Arial, comma. I don't know what trebuchet is.
What screen are we supposed to be looking at?
Oh, my apologies. You're absolutely correct. Uh, right, we're looking at the wrong one. Um, Here we go. We should be looking at my VS Code and the web page. But let me go back. Let me take a little step back so I can show you. So, we did not cover font family. So we did font family, right? And I got a bunch of different options right off the bat. And my computer is about to die. Step by. Sorry about that. But yeah, so we have font family here. And once I put the color here, I get a bunch of options. Uh, this is how it looks like right now, just so you can see it. And of course, I have to increase the font size. So let's go ahead and say font size. We're gonna say 10 view width. There we go. And then back to the font family, I'm going to say Arial. And then I want to default to time. Do we have Times New Roman? Yeah, we do have Times New Roman. Times New Roman. And then finally, we'll give it serif as an option, right? So you can give it multiple options here. In the event one of these fails, right? So as you can see, as I hover over this, it says specifies a prioritized list of font family names or generic family names. Uh, that way, in the event one of these fails, or it can't be rendered specifically, uh, it backs up to one of these, right? And notice that states did change. It no longer looks like it was before. Uh, so yeah, so you can do font family. You have some generic basic ones here, so you can change it. I owe you the one after our student practice for the Google one. But do I have any questions before we break off for a couple minutes and working on the next assignment? Okay. All right. Colors.html is a pretty straightforward one. Let's open it up. It should be inside of lesson 3. Intro to CSS. We have colors. You're gonna go ahead and open up the HTML, and you should have some basic um, HTML, nothing too crazy, just enough so you get working. And when I open this up with live server, sorry, my live server, I need to fix it so bad. Open browser, lesson 3, intro to CSS, colors HTML. Right, it looks like this, right? We have different headers, H1, H2. We have a section that has a P tag, and then we have a footer who also has a header. Uh, there's no specific instructions here, as in like in a README, but the text itself is going to tell you what you need to do. So you're essentially going to walk through each element and then do whatever the text says. For example, make this text blue, underline, and have a gold background. And then you just follow the instructions as such. As you will see as well, the style sheet is already linked. It's the same style sheet that's within the colors folder. So you can just navigate there and start CSSing away. And then time is 7:01. We're gonna go ahead and come back at 7:15 and continue with the class. But this should be just a quick little assignment. Give it a try. Let's get a volunteer.
I got most of it done.
Okay, yeah, let's see it, Nick.
Okay. Okay, so the first one made it blue, underlined it, and have a gold background. This one said make a text purple, bolded, 25 pixels, and have an orange border. When I Googled how to make an orange border, I wasn't sure if it was a box around it orange or the edge of the text orange, so I just did the edge of the text orange, which is why it looks so nasty.
To make an actual border, my guy.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought, but I couldn't figure out how to do it, so I was like, okay,
No,
border the
it
text orange.
this is cool. I've actually never seen this. That is actually pretty cool. You're the first. Uh, Interesting.
This section, make the width 50%, height 200 pixels, background gray, and paragraph text white. I did all those. I didn't make the border black because I couldn't figure it out. And then I think for the last one, the exact same issue. Oh no, I didn't finish the last one. I was still working on it.
Okay.
So what's the command for a border?
Yeah, it's gonna be border. And you already put the pixels, but you need to specify what type of border. So it's 5 pixels space. Make it a solid border,
Oh, that's right. Solid.
and then you can put orange there because
So
they
that's supposed
asked
to be.
for the
Well, this
orange
one is
border.
black, and then the one
Oh,
above
my
is supposed
bad.
to be orange.
Yeah, you're right.
That's what I was doing. I didn't specify all the different things it needed.
Hmm, okay. All right.
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, my bad. I was getting distracted. Yeah. Good stuff. Appreciate that. I'm assuming everyone got pretty much around to the same spot he did. All right. Let's see. Okay. Uh, let's go ahead and continue with today's class. We should all be seeing my VS Code. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. Sorry for earlier. Let's go ahead and I want to talk about colors.html, specifically the Google fonts. I fixed it, or I figured out what it was. It was a very dumb mistake. So for example, here is here's one, right? I use the tag script. Uh, Let me expand the web. Okay. So tagger script. Let me go back. So this is a very random one. You can definitely tell what this looks like, right? It almost looks like a Halloween theme. So nothing crazy here. I wanted to grab this one. There's other styles I could have used, I believe. No, this is it. But I just press get font, and just like before, we get the embedded fonts. Regular 400 is only one, and all you have to do is copy the code. Where is? Yeah, there we go. We're gonna do it on the color one. Here's the color.html. I have already put it. Let me go ahead and delete it again. Uh, Literally just copy and paste, like I had mentioned. Nothing is different, right? You don't have to do anything special for this specifically. The only thing is, what this does is it gives you access to a new font. So I assume that by just adding this, it would automatically change it. But I want
You
to
had
point
it wasn't
out,
applied to it.
right, it wasn't applied to it. So it now gives me access to the tagget script, is what it's called. Yeah, tagget script. That's the font family here. So I'm going to copy it real quick. And then in style.css, what you're going to do is you're going to apply to something. So I'm going to go ahead and apply it to the entire body. I'm going to say font family. And it won't come out here normally because these are the default. So that's why I copy and paste it. And as you see here, when I save it, it's gonna update the font. So what it essentially does, it gives you access to the font in the CSS document. It won't add it to that drop down, but you're able to copy and paste it, right? The name there. So you can use it. You are able to get Google fonts, uh, but it won't automatically apply it, right? So I told you guys I owed you an answer, and I got you an answer. All right, let's go ahead and continue. So we talked about color HTML. That was very brief. Nice little example. Relationships. Awesome. So the first way that we talked about setting up CSS was by calling the element very specifically, right? So we said p tag, h1, div, whatever it may be. Now let's actually talk about relationships. The first code snippet here is the top two right here, the left and right top two, the first line. You will see here we have a section, and within this section, this has a p tag, right? A paragraph tag. Uh, there's ways to specify what level in your element you want to manipulate. Now, this will not be the same as this. These are two different applications. This one, it has a p tag, and this one also has a p tag, but the bottom one is inside of an article, right? What this is saying is, hey, inside of section, I want to get the element that's directly nested within section, and it has to be a paragraph tag, and I want you to color it red, right? Here, to grab the p tag, they didn't use the what's it called? I guess the greater than
Greater than.
symbol. Yeah. I know there's a specific term for these. I forgot the name for it. We didn't use the greater than symbol. We said section space p, right? So within section, I want you, or essentially, because section is going to grab every section, I want you to change, go into every section, and for every section that has a paragraph tag, change it to red. Whereas this one's something a little bit different. This is saying inside of this of all the sections, if there's a section that has a p tag directly after it, change that one to red, right? So two different things. The hierarchy in your elements is dictated by the nested of elements, right? So section here is the opening tag and this is the closing tag. So what this tells me is this section has a paragraph inside of it, right? Because it's within the opening and the closing tags. Also, it's indented to the right within here, right? So I can visually see that this p tag is a child, right? And pay attention to that terminology. This p tag is a child of section, right? That's what we call it. When something is directly nested within it, specifically tags, right? Uh, we call this the child tag, and this is the parent, right? Because it comes directly within it. So this is a product of section, which is why here, when we want to specify a section that has a child that's a paragraph, we need to use the uh the gradient symbol. Here, p tag is not a direct child of section. It is a child of article. An article is a child of section. So if you would have used this relationship command here for your elements here to try to grab this one, it would not work because p tag is not a direct child of section. It is a child of article. Make sense? Any questions there? Okay, well, let's see it in real time, just for the sake of ensuring that we all get it. Here is this. Let me get rid of this stupid font because it's ugly. All right. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to comment this out. I'm going to say section I'm gonna say P. I'm gonna say I am a child of section. Cool. Next, I'm going to get section. Then I'm gonna say article. And then I'm gonna say P. I'm gonna say I am an article of, or I am a child of article. Let me go and zoom in. And let's add some styling to here. If I say section and then child, I'm gonna say P tag. Say color red. Oh, it's not working because my style sheets are not in here. Give me a second. I gotta link it. I'm gonna say link. Oh, this is self-posted tag. Relationship is style sheets. And the href is going to be style.css. There we go. Sorry for that. I actually deleted it when I added the other stuff. But here we go. Right. So I was able to grab section and P and then make it red. Notice that the second one did not change. Right. It stayed black. Right. That's because the P tag does not come directly after section. Right. It is not a direct child of section. This syntax is specifically grabbing the P tag that's nested after a section, right? Now let's go ahead and do the other one. Let's say section P, and I'm going to say color blue. What happened?
Cascading.
It did cascade. Why did it change both of these though?
Because it looks like you're saying, go back to the style sheet.
Of course.
It looks like you're saying within section, any P, turn it blue, which both the first and the second qualify for.
Correct.
What happens if
Absolutely
you
right.
reverse their order?
If I reverse the order, that's a good point. Uh, it changes it, right?
Okay. Yep.
The first one makes all P tags that are somewhere inside of a section to blue. But then we overrode that command that if there is a P tag that is nested directly after a section, that one has to be red. So it overrode it. Right? That's the cascading effect, of course. So that's one way of doing it. What about this one?
I don't know. Looks like it's saying if there's a P directly followed by another P, then turn them red.
Oh, say that again.
If there's two P tags, one after the other, change their color to red.
Right. Is that referring to what is it? Okay, I want you to elaborate on what do you mean by one after another.
Uh, Not separated in different sections, not nested differently from each other on the same level.
Right. And you are exactly right. Let's go back to this. Right. Let's go ahead and say P plus P. I'm gonna say color yellow. Now these change, obviously. Uh, although they're both P tags, what happens when let's not do it here actually. Oh no. What happened? What did I do? Okay. When I come here, I'm gonna say P tag. And then I'm gonna say I am a sibling. This is not Sibling is not an actual terminology. Only child and parent is, but I'm just sticking to the analogy. I am a sibling of P. And I think what's causing an issue right now. Color yellow P plus P. What's going on here? What happened? Yo, what did I do wrong? Why are these all red? That should not have happened. Wait a second. No. This should not have happened. Why is it doing this? It's child piece right here. This one should have stayed. Does someone see something I don't see?
Go back to the slides, the example.
Oh, there it goes. My bad. It
Ah,
was
you
driving me crazy. Oh Lord, that was gonna drive me crazy. I was like, yo, I know I didn't do anything wrong. That wasn't right. Yeah, okay. So P plus P. It only changed this one, right? Uh, it didn't grab this one, but it grabbed the other one, and these stayed as black. I'm actually surprised. I could have sworn it was the other way around. So what it seems like this is doing is that we are going to ignore this paragraph tag. We only want a paragraph tag that comes after a paragraph tag, not in a different level, but on the same level. So they have to be on the same level. Ignore the first one, but grab the second one, right? Let's add a third one. Let's introduce a third one. Hello. Why does this one work?
that follows the same rules. It's a P
Yeah,
tag followed immediately by a P tag on the same level.
absolutely right. This one followed this one. This one followed this one. This one is in a different element, which is why this one didn't take effect. But yeah, this one followed this one. Honestly, what I'm more confused about right now is why,
Why they stop being blue and red?
yeah, why these got overridden. I am actually very confused of why it had that functionality. I'm gonna have to look into this one. But these should not have changed. Uh, what is going on? Just let me navigate. Huh, that is actually very interesting behavior. I don't usually do this walkthrough like this, so I'm actually surprising myself. We'll get to this one. Trick question, more specificity. No, Andy, was not specificity. The specificity stays the same, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But yeah, that was actually very interesting because I have not done that one in that manner. But yeah, so this one is right after another one. So not nested, but they have to be on the same level. Ignore the first one, grab the second one. So you will probably never use this. That this is very kind of very limited. I have never really used this besides when I teach it. Uh, Same thing with these. These might come in handy, but there's better ways of doing these, but it's nice to know that how these work. Before we talk about specificity, we're going to go into relationships.html. Uh, Inside of your curriculum, it should be in its own directory. So we're going to go ahead and open up relationships, and you're going to see uh, a list of different animals and some messages. The instructions are up here. They are commented out. Take it from top to bottom and work it, right? This one's going to kind of just uh, build or make you try the relationships, right? So you're going to be using these relationships and how we access different things, right? This is a fairly quick exercise, right? Just it's taking like 5 minutes. So what we're gonna do is it's time 7:37. Take the next 5 minutes to work on this. So thankfully until 7:42, and then go on a 10-minute break. Come back at 7:52, and we'll talk about specificity. Probably the biggest thing about CSS specificity, IDs, and classes. That's probably where how you how we're gonna actually use CSS. So I'll see you guys in about 15 minutes, technically. All right, welcome back, everybody. So we're about to go into see talk about specificity, right? Um, IDs, classes, inline CSS. I've been hinting towards it for a while now. What type of CSS you would actually be using on your web browser more often than others, why you would use it, and how we can uh, apply CSS to our entire project without having to, to call specific elements, right? Because this is not really too helpful, right? You wouldn't always want to just change the CSS for all p tags or all sections, right? And then having to imagine having to nest within like a section, trying to grab the next p tag and then the following. That's not very ideal. Now, this is helpful for like small things, uh, but these are very unique scenarios which you really won't be doing too much often, right? So let's talk about specificity and what is that. So specificity is a way of selecting distinct elements so you can style them, right? Specificity is specifically for your browser. Specificity is what your browser uses to be able to categorize what it should prioritize when it comes to display your HTML, right? Um, we saw a couple of specificity already, inline CSS, but how much specificity does it have, right? Well, to understand all of the whole concept of specificity, we have to understand other ways of specifying our elements, and that is by the way of IDs and classes, right? So there are two ways or two additional ways that we are able to grab a specific element, and that is by assigning them either an ID or a class. Now, which one you use is going to depend on the level of specificity. The first one here that we see is the ID attribute, right? We have a paragraph element, right, that says hello world. And what they did was they gave it the attribute of ID. And what you assign here as an ID is really going to be up to you, right? You can call it whatever you want. Just like variable names or functions, you typically want to give it some kind of naming convention that is relevant to what it's being assigned to, right? So obviously this doesn't make sense here, right? ID is zebra for a paragraph tag that says
Are you
hello
sharing?
world. Oh, my apologies. Let me go ahead and share. Thank you for that. Are we all seeing my slides?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Thank you. So yeah, so the IDs and classes. The first item we see here is ID, right? Here's a p tag that has hello world with the ID of zebra. And as I was saying right before, is when you give an ID or a class, as you'll see in a bit, you want to give it a relevant name, right? Uh, Obviously, this example isn't a good example. We gave it the idea of zebra for a paragraph tag that says "Hello World." Uh, Typically, you'll have different components in your application. Like you might create some kind of component, um, and you'll understand what components mean in React later. Pretty much like if you have a paragraph that's specifically talking, or let's say you have a form, right? You have a form element. You might want to give this form an ID or a class that says like login form, right? That way, whenever you go to style this, you know what the style is. So if you're looking through your CSS, you're like, I know all my login forms should have a specific styling. So you look for the ID or the class in your CSS for login form. So it's easier to find. So you want to give it a relevant name so you understand what it pertains to. So when you actually declare this on your element, you do it as such. You're going to put it like all the other attributes inside of your opening tag, right? And it's as simple as declaring ID is equal to, and then you open um, essentially like a string, right? The quotation marks, and you give it the ID that you want to assign it. Now, how you actually reference this in your CSS document is going to be via the hashtag. So in your CSS document, instead of adding a specific tag or element like P or H1 or div, you're going to specify the ID that you're trying to grab by using the hashtag, right? So we see here hashtag zebra, and the give it color is red. Now, the other way of selecting other elements is by the class, right? And these have two different purposes, but just like ID, it's going to go into the opening tag, but this time you're going to give it a class attribute. And same thing as ID, you're going to give it something that's relevant to what it pertains to. Now, when selecting it in your CSS, you want to use the dot notation, right? So dot robot is going to be for a class. So classes are dots or periods, and IDs will be hashtags, right? The best way to remember of which one is going to be which is really when you think of IDs, you might be thinking of like an ID number, right? So a number hashtag, right? When thinking about classes, we haven't gotten to classes or object-oriented programming yet, but whenever you have classes, you typically give them methods using dots, like dot notation, kind of like dot upper or dot lower or dot strip, right? You have these built-in methods in Python. When you create your own methods as well, they are invoked by using the dot method. So that's kind of how I like to think about it. Classes use dot methods. So same thing in CSS, we're using a dot, right? So if you ever forget which is for which, that's kind of like the way that I used to remember it. Maybe it helps you or not. Now, let's go ahead and continue. Specificity and the cascade. So what do I mean by specificity? Essentially, specificity is, as I mentioned, how your browser is going to select what it should prioritize. And we're going to go to the whiteboard to kind of show this out. Specificity is rated by a point system. Uh, Actually, let me delete these. Let's make this bigger. And then copy, paste this. And it's going to be from right to left is the best way of showing this, right? Uh, what's going to be in these is going to be, I'm going to say 0, and let's make this bigger. All right. The first box on the right, this is your, what would you call it? I guess your singles, kind of. Your tens, your hundreds, and this is your thousands, right? Think of it kind of like a fraction, right? When you think about 1.000, right? In this fraction, we have tens, hundreds, and to thousands, right? On the decimal system, it's kind of similar to that in a way, but it's kind of backwards, right? And we start the singles, so almost like a number value. So whenever you assign or you are trying to grab something in your CSS, there is a level of specificity. Take a quick guess. What has the highest specificity and what has the lowest? Okay, I guess no one has any guesses. Right, so the lowest level of specificity that we are going to have in CSS is going to be your elements, right? When selecting something in CSS, your p tag, your div, uh, your headers, right? When you grab something in CSS using an element, right? It has one level of specificity, right? 1 point of specificity is a much better term, right? We have 1 point of specificity. What do you think is the highest? And I've hinted towards to it already before.
ID.
No, it is going to be inline. But good guess. Inline CSS has 1,000 points of specificity, right? The 1000. The second highest is going to be your class. Class, if you grab something with a class, it's going to have 10 points of specificity. And the third highest is going to be your ID. If something has an ID, it has 100 points of specificity, right? So if you have an element like H1, this has 1 point of specificity. The moment that you give it a class, this now has 10 points of specificity, right? We go from element to class ID in inline, right? It adds a point to the tens, right? If I have a class and then I also have like an ID, actually, let's remove the class for now. We'll keep it simple. If we give an ID of greeting, this element has 100 points of specificity. If I create inline CSS, this element has 1,000 points of specificity, right? So when your browser reads through your HTML and CSS elements or declarations, it's going to see this. So when it runs into an element that has inline CSS, it has 1,000 points of specificity. Here's where the issue comes into play. If I add a class of greeting and I have in my CSS document class.greeting, I'm going to say height is 200 pixels. What styling is going to actually show on my browser? This element has inline styling and it has a class. But in my CSS document, I select the class and I give it a height of 200 pixels. What styling will be the one that's displayed?
Inline.
Inline. right? Because when it sees this, when the browser runs this, my project, it's going to look at this element, it's going to see the inline styling, it's going to prioritize the inline styling over the class. Even if in the class, I'm sorry, even if the CSS document is calling a class and trying to give it some kind of styling, it's not going to care. It's going to prioritize the inline styling because the inline styling is 1,000 points of specificity, right? Where the class is only 10, right? Make sense? Same thing with the ID. If I put an ID here, um, I give it an ID of welcome. And then let's say I have ID here. I'm gonna say welcome. Height is 300 pixels. Because there's inline styling, it's going to ignore both class and ID and it's going to show the inline styling. But if I remove the inline styling, which one is it going to display? Welcome or greeting? Well, it's going to display welcome, right? Even though greeting comes later in the CSS, the ID has a higher level of specificity, therefore it will not get overridden. Welcome will stay. So if you give an ID to an element, if you start off with high level of specificity and you style it like that early on in your CSS, and maybe like 200 lines of CSS later, you try to override it by using a class, it won't work because above it in the beginning of your CSS document, you are using an ID to style it already. So if you try to go to a class, a lower level of specificity to style it, you won't be able to. And that's where conflicts start happening. So whenever you begin to give styling to your elements, you want to start off at the lowest level of specificity. Now, that's a little uh, misleading because technically, element is very limited, right? Because if you try to style your element tags on your HTML by just strictly calling the element CSS, you're going to style everything. So technically, you want to start off with class, right? You want to start off with class, unless everything should have a baseline. All p tags should all be a specific font. Then you might want to start with elements, right? And then if there's another section that has to be overridden to a different font, you can use class, right? And then you can start using IDs. And then last but not least, you might want to use inline. But inline is used very sparingly because it's hard to override later on. The only way to change the style of something that has inline styling is to change it in the inline styling or just remove it completely from the inline and then give it an ID and then do the ID instead, right? So does that mean we don't use inline styling at all? Not necessarily, right? Um, for those of you on Mac or those of you who have seen a Mac browser, right? I used this example before. The top left part of your browser has like the X, right? That's red. And there's this button like that on your web application that should have something very similar to that, where there's only one exit button or one button that needs to be a specific color. Sure, you can use inline styling for that. Sure, you can get away with that. But you want to use it as like a last resort. You might just want to start with class first, and then you increase the specificity as you progress. So it's not that you'll never use inline styling. It's used very sparingly because if you want to update it later on, it can become a pain to change. And remember, look at the weather app, right? The weather app, when we look through the HTML structure, it's crazy, right? This is a lot of HTML. This is a lot of HTML. Imagine trying to sort through all of this to look for a specific tag, right? for multiple different pages, it can become a pain. It makes it very difficult to debug later or to update or to scale. So you do not want to start off with inline. You want to start off at class, right? Typically people don't use element too often. I rarely see it. Even if you go to styles here, uh, only certain things they're doing style. For example, the header or the main seems to be having some kind of style, right? Everything in the HTML document, as you see here, has a certain styling, and then you slowly start overriding things as you need to change things. Um, so they gave everything a baseline of a color, and then they added specific other styles to it, right? So just keep that in mind. So tags have 1 point of specificity. Classes, oh, here's the next part. Reusing or not reusing. So classes can be reused by multiple other elements, right? You can create a class and give this class to as many p tags. You can give it to as you shoot. You can give it to multiple different tags that are not the same. It won't have the same effect though, but yeah, you can give classes to other elements, right? Multiple elements can have the same class. IDs though are unique, right? An ID, once you give an ID to an element, only that element can have that ID, right? Which is once again why we start with classes first before we jump up to IDs, right? Once things start becoming very unique, that's when we add IDs into them. In case there's only one thing that should have an ID, right? But for the most part, you're probably going to use classes more often than anything else, right? So be aware that IDs are unique. Only one element can have that specific ID, right? Inline styles are 1,000 points of specificity. You want to avoid these and use them very sparingly. It's not that you can't use them, it's just that you don't want to use them all over your document because it can lead to issues. And here is that little demonstration that I showed you, right? The little image. And we have a small little exercise that we can do. Uh, we did not cover this one. Does anyone want to demonstrate their code before we move on to specificity? I completely overlooked the assignment that I assigned you guys. Anybody at all?
Let me pull it up.
Right on. Sorry, I kind of jumped the gun and went straight to the next part of the lesson. I just need someone to demonstrate so that way, if anybody else is following along with the course, they can see like someone else's example and be able to kind of compare their code.
Okay. Let me know when you all can see my screen.
We can see it. Try to move your VS Code a little bit more to the left so we can see the code if you can. Close the
Yep. Let
File
me adjust this real quick.
Explorer. Yeah, yeah, of course, of course.
There, you can see the code now, right?
Right, right.
But the code,
So
I didn't change any of the code in the relationships, just the CSS
correct.
file.
Yeah, so
And this
first
is the
one, uh-huh.
not this is not the right one. Intro to CSS
I was about to say
relationships.
it looks like it's not
That's
complete.
that's the next one.
Sure, sure, sure. Okay.
Relationships, and then there we go.
There we go. Yeah, so you start off, you made everything purple, which was good, and then you slowly changed them. You made all H2's font yellow, which is it was pretty much all of them. Oh, not all of them. There is hello was not H2, so that shouldn't have been yellow, so that didn't get overridden. But world, zebra, and unicorn and ducks. Everything else, every element from the second one to the left or the next one were purple. Oh, sorry, yellow. You change your mind and you only want world and zebra. Purple. So you had to specify something that World and Zebra shared in common, which is the fact that they're both underneath a section. So therefore, yeah, you good. You made sure that you got the H2 element that's directly after a section, so that was good. Then you made unicorn and duck font red. And those share a similarity, which is they're all part of an article. You could have done article nested, an H2 nested in article. Um, but then we see that you did you change your mind, so you make unicorn font orange. Okay. Yeah, so yeah, either or, both would have done the same thing. Uh looks good. Did you have any questions about the assignment? Does anybody have any questions about the assignment? It was a pretty straightforward one. It was just kind of messing around with the relationships. All right. Yeah. So no questions. Awesome. I just want to make sure that we can share some code so people can see it. And if anybody had any questions, you guys could have asked. But let's go ahead. Let me go back to share my screen. We are going to go into our second to last assignment for the night, which is going to be specificity.html. And this is going to be practicing with IDs and classes, right? You have something already pre-built. You're going to follow, once again, the instructions set inside the HTML document. You're going to use the classes and IDs to change the your content, right? So no longer are we using relationships or elements. Leverage the IDs and classes to try to manipulate them, right? This one should be straightforward as well. So we'll take about 5 minutes on this one, and then we will come back in a little bit. So time is 8:18. Let's go ahead and come back at 8. Let's say 24. All right, welcome back. Were you guys be able to complete most of it, or at least all of it?
I think so.
Okay, yeah. So let's go through it. I'm specifically taking charge of this one for the fact that we have multiple classes here, and I know it can be a little bit confusing. But let's kind of walk through this, right? So the first command here was please make only Rhino and Zebra blue. So looking down here, I see I have Rhino and Zebra. They both have classes and IDs. Now I kind of want to look at the classes and IDs if anything else shares uh, the classes with this one. And I see nothing else shares the same class as Rhino and Zebra. So it's pretty safe to say that I can probably use these classes. And I want to say these are two different classes, right? There is a space here. Um, these are two different classes. So if I want to grab a class, I'm going to use a dot symbol, and I'm going to say Africa, right? So you'll see that you might get an error. You try to do Africa four links. It won't register what this is. I think I misspelled it actually as well. But see, it won't register the fact that you would think that this might be one class, but it's actually two different classes. So we're going to use Africa. It's going to be the first class that I see here. And you might be asking, well, Roger, does this change the level of specificity? No, it does not. It is still 10 points of specificity when it comes to the class. Which one you use, does it matter? No, just because four legs comes first or four legs comes after doesn't necessarily mean it's better than Africa or vice versa, right? It's just you're able to call upon this element using two different classes. Uh, so we're gonna take one and we're gonna run with it. We'll take Africa for now, and we'll see how this works. Right? We want to make Rhino and Zebra blue, so I'm gonna set color to blue. And there we go. Let's go ahead and move down. And now say that please make only Hufflepuff code. And Hufflepuff is this H2 header right here. And if I want to grab Hufflepuff, I can use class or IDs, right? And Rhino and Zebra both have classes or IDs, but once again, we want to start the lowest level of specificity. We don't want to just jump straight into this and use an ID to access these. Although they do have IDs, you don't want to start with the highest level of specificity. So we're gonna start low. And then for Hufflepuff, I can grab either one of these classes. I see Harry Potter, Triwizard Chap, or Badger. I'm gonna grab just Harry Potter for now. So I'm gonna say dot Harry Potter. And we want to make it gold. So I'm gonna say color gold. There we go. Next was please make duck with the highest level of specificity possible. Uh, Technically, the highest level of specificity possible that it has right now is only class. Now, if I wanted to actually give it the highest level of specificity possible, I would give it an ID. So you could have done that, or you could just stick to this. As I mentioned before, technically, these are still the same level of specificity. Which one you choose doesn't really matter. So you could have created an ID for duck. You could have said ID is equal to duck, whatever you want to call it, or bird, right? Bird class, bird ID. And you could have gotten it with the highest level of specificity possible. Uh, I could do that or just use the class because technically right now, as it stands, the highest level of specificity possible is the fact that it has a class. Once again, we can do either one. So we're going to say dot likes to quack. And it doesn't say anything about what to do with it. So I'm just going to give it a random color. I'm going to say color red. And then the next one was Rhino. Well, we already actually used something in Rhino. We used Africa. So the next highest level of specificity for Rhino would be the ID. So I would say hashtag Rhino. And I would say color, let's make it green. So it's actually a fairly simple assignment. But the reason why I wanted to do this so I can open up a topic of conversation. Why do we have two classes? Um, well, you can give elements multiple classes. They're reusable. What if I had in this scenario, both Rhino and Zebra should be the same color. But what if um, Rhino should be 50% of my view height? Now that's pretty absurd, right? But I'm just giving an example here. And if I want to keep the level of specificity low, I could give it another class that Zebra doesn't have, like size, right? And I can say dot size, and I may say height 50 view height. And this did not work like I thought it would. Oh, I'm missing something. Font size. What am I doing wrong? There is something funny going. Oh, I think I gave ID. Let's not use Rhino. Let's use it. Let's use Zebra instead as an example. Oh, that's absurd. Actually, disregard. I did not make a mistake. What happened was, give me a second. I'm sorry. What happened was I did not save my HTML document, I believe. Height 50, no, we'll say 20 view height. So it's not too absurd. There we go. Yeah, I didn't make a mistake. I just didn't save my HTML document. I thought the Rhino here was messing with it, but that shouldn't have been the case. All right, so here we go. So let's not do height, let's do font size because it's not doing what I want to do. There we go. I want both. Let's remove the this right here. I want both Rhino and Zebra to have the same type of formatting that they're both going to be blue, but specifically Rhino needs to be bigger. So I'm able to give multiple things a baseline of some kind of style, but there's some very unique elements that need to be something different or have additional styling, then that's when the second or third or fourth class can come in handy. So it allows you to add some more styling without removing the previous one and without increasing the level of specificity. So using this method, I was able to keep both these blue without having to jump to another level of specificity by giving them an additional class. That way I can give Rhino the exercise that it required without giving it an ID to have to increase the level of specificity. Does that make sense? So it gives you additional option to add some styling without increasing the level of specificity. Uh, I don't believe there's a limit to how many classes you can give them. So, just don't make it too crazy where it's just like a long line of classes. But you are able to do something like this, right? Give it an additional class to avoid jumping to ID right off the bat. You could, but two different ways of doing it, right? Any questions so far? All right. Uh, let's go ahead and finish this class. That's gonna be it for assignments, but let's look at the next part. The box model. We talked a little bit about this yesterday off camera, right? But essentially, the box model is a representation of what everything on your web page really is. Everything is a box, right? And we saw that earlier in the week, or yesterday specifically, when I used the inspect tool, right, and I hover to different parts of this browser, you can start to see that everything is all within its own box. And the reason we do that is so we can keep like items with like items and to make styling easier, right? We're able to line these boxes up together by putting them all within one bigger box and then styling the outer box with the content inside. Kind of very similar to when I was messing around with that what H1 header earlier, and I was messing with the text and shifting it to different parts of the box. That's kind of what you're trying to do with using divs. You put the components you're trying to style left, right, inline, horizontal, vertically, however you want to do it, all within a bigger box that you can use to manipulate everything that's within it, right? So box models are very helpful, and you start to realize that everything on your page is essentially just a box inside of a box inside of a box, right? The more you stare at a website, the more you realize that's what you're actually just looking at, right? Everything has a height and width, right? The value of whatever your element is. They all have padding. Everything can have a border, and everything can have a margin, right? We talked a little bit about it already, how we manipulate those, what they are, and so on and so forth. Now, the box model is going to be kind of like your homework, if you guys would like. We can cover it tomorrow early in the class because we won't have enough time to break up, work on it, and come back. But the box model is going to be your exercise to practice moving stuff around, right? Let me go ahead and open this in live share so I can show you what's going to look like and what your goal should be. Open with live server. This is lesson 3. Tracy says box model, right? What you are going to do is essentially, once again, take the text and you're going to add boxes to this, right? Use some padding, manipulate the padding, uh, the margins, increase the size, and see how the boxes shift left and right. Kind of very similar to how I was doing earlier today to see how the boxes interact. When it comes to styling the boxes, that's actually going to be right afterwards, which is layout, CSS, grid, and flexbox. Um, this is actually a very good exercise. As a matter of fact, let's stop here because I would like to go through this exercise because this is actually very important. Messing with your boxes. So we're gonna put a pause on this. We're gonna do this tomorrow. The first part of class, we're finishing off the box model, and we're going to also work on Flexbox and CSS, and we'll talk about this, and I can show you how this works. But it's actually what the box model is. It's going to be your practice, so you can work with manipulate the boxes. And then you'll get to see how we talked about how the BBC website is a box model. And tomorrow, what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how you're going to create divs and how we're going to align them to kind of reach something very similar to this, where we can organize them from top to bottom, aligned, horizontally, how we're going to manipulate multiple boxes within boxes to better format your web page to look something very similar to this, where you can get something like this where it's very flexible, right? You have different boxes at different parts of your web page shifted. You have a much smaller box here. I can already tell this box right here is probably taking about 20 to 30% of the view width. Um, this is taking at least 50% of the view width. We're going to talk about how we're going to kind of manipulate these. But that is an exercise of itself, and I can't just ignore this one. So we're going to stop here because we don't have any possible amount of time to actually really cover this and let you guys get enough practice. Once we finish this tomorrow, we are going to go into JavaScript, right, and actually adding some functionality. Do I have any questions about anything that we have covered today? The CSS, syntax, the properties or the values, anything at all?
I was wondering, are we still going to cover API tomorrow?
Tomorrow is JavaScript. APIs will probably be Monday.
Okay, it's getting pushed back a little. Okay.
Yeah, like I told you, it's very tentative, the schedule, right? So CSS, the last time I ran this class, we were able to run through both of these, start JavaScript this day, which is why it's here. But because this class is taking a little bit longer, we're going to shift JavaScript to Friday, and we're going to do APIs on Monday. But it's okay. We're still on schedule. Reason for that is because usually the last week is pretty quickly, and this class usually never happens. So we have an additional day that we can work with. So we have some buffer space. Make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, APIs are it's a very good class. You guys really want, we want to take our time on this one. Same thing with CRUD apps. It's kind of bringing everything together and building some kind of nice little web page, um, like a very basic web page, right?
Hey Roger, just looking at the schedule and all the material we're gonna cover, this is like a very in-depth foundation of programming. So I was wondering, like, if once the classes start, are we going to build up on everything we've learned so far, or is just going to be a repeat again?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the immersive program is going to start you on this as well, and it's going to talk more in depth. Actually, let's look at it. I can show you the curriculum that you're going to be working with anyways, because you guys already accepted. Let me go ahead and stop the recording, actually.